Hi everyone, this is Ali John Chaudhary, psychotherapist, and today I'm here with Fern Schumer Chapman, author. And today we're going to be talking about navigating incompleteness with sibling estrangement. Now, being cut off unexpectedly is one of the hardest parts that comes with sibling estrangement. It can leave us in a torment-inducing state that causes us to relive each moment that led up to this, somehow wondering if we missed something or if it was something we said or did. And if we're not careful, it can lead us into rumination that can cause us to experience sadness and shame, especially. In today's episode, we're going to be highlighting the role of incompleteness and how this can play a significant part in our sibling estrangement. So, Fern, it's great to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's really good to be here. Torment and rumination. Those are key words for me. I lived it for decades and really struggled with this idea that my brother had cut me off, and I didn't really have any insight or understanding as to why he cut me off. And that led to many days of looking in the mirror and wondering what I did and how I could fix it. And I was caught in that cycle for a very long time until I finally had a breakthrough. And obviously, that was the basis for writing my memoir, Brothers, Sisters, Strangers. And as it turned out, Allie John, all of my assumptions about why this had happened were wrong.
Yeah, and I can see that. I can see that because what you and I have been talking about a little bit before was this idea of how we construct a narrative that, if we're not careful, can be very wrong and inaccurate with regards to the situation and such, right?
Well,
So,
the brain is desperate for a story. And so we take the little bits of information that we have and we connect it into some sort of explanation, and it doesn't necessarily reflect truth.
you and I really like to put the emphasis on the reasons why a lot of this is happening, right? Because we've been studying this, we've been, of course, understanding this, we've been exchanging with people in our community because of all this in terms of what they're experiencing. And I think it's good that we ask ourselves, like, what's been causing this? And I think that when communication breaks down, it can leave us at a standstill and really create an isolation for us. And of course, silence, marginalization, and shunning can occur with this incompleteness. Now, some of the things that, of course, occur that can cause this is one of them is negative interpretation and how an incident played itself out. And I find that when people conclude that we purposefully hurt them or embarrass them or talk down to them, then this is sometimes what leads to a cutout, especially this idea that if they feel bad, it's because of something that was said or done. And that's the simple explanation that some people can come to. And I find that this particular thinking is really black and white because it's one of the prime contributors to holding grudges, especially.
Well, with siblings too, these are very old relationships, and people look like other members of the family, for example, and there's a lot of triggering that goes on. And sometimes these triggers occur without acknowledgement or understanding that that's what's happening. And so it's a very subtle explanation sometimes for why these things happen. And it might have nothing to do with an insult or a way in which somebody spoke to you. It may have everything to do with some old hurt from childhood, for example, or that you look like your father and I can't stand our father.
Of course, that's very true, right? It's not one single explanation that will cover everything. And I think what you're alluding to is this inability to manage negative feelings, right? And I think that when negative feelings become overwhelming, it can cause people to want to blame others for when they experience this. So it's everybody's fault except theirs. And in some cases, it can even be comfortable for some people to stay angry. I don't know if you've met people like this, but I have. It's like they thrive at this intense negative emotion because it's very mobilizing for them and it makes them feel very much alive. And we don't really need to think too far about people that are like this. We can think about people that are into politics in a very strong way, where they're always looking for contentious conversations in the hopes of somehow having their buttons pushed so that gives them the green light to berate, dominate, or belittle their sibling or any other person for that matter.
Yeah, you see this a lot with some narcissists who use situations to punish. So, for example, I'm going to withdraw contact with you so that I get my way.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I find that that's the thing that happens a lot of times with some people. And you also see this with people playing the victim card as well. Narcissists will do this, right? And they will receive power sometimes just by withholding communication, using the silent treatment as a weapon against others, even just twisting the story to make themselves into the hero of their narrative, just to gain support from other people, right?
Yeah, and it's a great way to avoid conflict resolution or personal responsibility or even compromising. And they're punishing at the same time the target. So it's working real well for them.
Exactly. And you've mentioned earlier this idea of lack of emotional intelligence, right? This lack of empathy that people have, right? And it's really this egocentric nature where people expect others to cater to their needs, right? And so much so that they don't have the ability to put themselves into other people's shoes, right? And what this does is this causes unevenness in relationships where you're always looking for more acknowledgement and understanding, or at worst, being scolded or punished or made to be the villain in a fictitious story that's all in our sibling's head.
Yeah, and it also offers you absolutely no recourse because first of all, you don't know what you did wrong. And secondly, you can't take responsibility for what you did wrong. And you can't apologize for what you did wrong. And therefore, you are essentially rendered voiceless.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you're very stuck in the current impasse.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into what we can do with some of this, of course, because I think that's really important because it manifests in different ways and it affects us in different ways, but there is a way out that can help us. And we're going to get into that in a few minutes. There's also, of course, bad management skills, bad conflict management skills in particular, right? This idea of avoiding conflicts when they arise. And we see this sometimes in some families where people will do nothing when there's a conflict or even after the conflict, they'll make as though nothing happened. And people are often left with their own feelings, like you were saying, right? This idea of somehow being made to be the scapegoat or the black sheep. And I find that oftentimes when people are avoidant and projecting these types of behaviors, what ends up happening is they end up repeating themselves as models that people internalize and later use at a later age as well,
Yeah, repeating the lie enough times that it becomes the truth.
right?
Um, I did want to add to what you were saying earlier, which is that particularly with narcissists, this kind of shutdown becomes its own form of betrayal and abuse. So, it's a way to manipulate your sibling, but it's also punishment.
Exactly. And two other reasons I find that come up, especially, is the idea of being over analytical, right? Some people can live so much in their headspace that they're divorced from their feelings or emotions. And that basically happens in some families where people basically shut down and they become avoidant or dismissive of the issue rather than actually talking about it because they just don't know what to do with it because they're here and not necessarily connected to what they're feeling.
Yeah, the head versus the heart. It's easier to intellectualize a situation than actually feel it emotionally.
Exactly. And one particular situation that occurs also is the idea that sometimes our sibling considers us beneath them, right? And it's the idea that they can simply don't see us as their people, so to speak. And that can bring up a sense of shame towards us for somehow not measuring up to this imagined ideal. And I sometimes wonder if that's not the case with my own particular relationship with my sibling, and I think it's more common than we think, especially.
So there is, as you know, in my book, I explore the risk factors. When I did the book, I had no idea that there were actually risk factors for estrangement, but there are, and one of them is exactly what you're referring to, and that's this idea of very divergent paths, whether it's being in a different class or financial situation or different lifestyle, different value system, different politics. Any of those things can create a tremendous divide between siblings. And often nobody wants to talk about it.
And that's very true. And that's what leaves and defines the hallmark of incompleteness when it comes
Right.
to that, never getting the answers. So let's talk about how this affects us because we've talked about what it looks like. Let's talk about what it makes us feel like, right? And I think you've alluded to the idea that our minds don't like stories that don't have an ending because we're always looking for an answer. And and the thing what that happens with this is that sometimes the uncertainty can play on our minds and build up as rumination.
And even worse, it affects how we look at ourselves. So there is this chronic sense that if my brother wants nothing to do with me, what does that really say about me? And will anybody else want something to do with me?
Yeah, that's the thing in terms of how we can potentially come up with a false conclusion. And this is where the danger lies in generalizing this. And it could also be an isolating experience for us to have to deal with family members that just don't have the maturity or willingness to make peace. And that can also be very distorting when it comes to the meaning that we have for family, especially.
Right. We have this expectation, which is a false expectation, and that is that your blood relatives will provide this constellation of support for for your life.
Yeah,
And that's simply, in our cases and in other cases, not true.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
there are a lot of institutions and cultural forces that perpetuate this myth.
Hmm.
And you see it on sitcoms and ads all the time. And, it really starts to create kind of a toxic shame surrounding a failed sibling or family relationship.
And I find this interesting, in terms of the messages society sends us, right? Because a lot of times people are encouraged to make amends, right? And we see this in some family settings where people will try to bargain by apologizing. And what happens with that is that when you're constantly apologizing just to make the peace, just to move on and have things go forward, it can be very emotionally draining because if you're the one always having to be the same person to do it, then you're never getting acknowledgement yourself for your own feelings, right?
It's funny you mentioned this because I just read something about from Dr. Gabor Mate, and he has talked extensively about how people choose attachment over authenticity
Mhm.
and how the need to belong is so deep that you will forfeit your own needs in order to sustain that relationship. It's a dangerous path.
I absolutely agree with you, Fern. I'm laughing a little bit because I've read exactly the same thing as you, and I'm just connecting the pieces together in my head in terms of peer pressure, right? What people do just to belong, right? And we see this at a very young age, but it keeps happening even in adult life. And
Mhm.
I find that oftentimes what happens is that people will sometimes be waiting for an apology, especially, because they want to have that acknowledgement. They want to have at least that sense of belonging returned to them. And sometimes it never happens. And they never quite get that understanding for why it is that they were treated the way they were.
Oh, yeah. You may get it and there's no follow through. So it's again a dangerous path because even if you get that apology, what are their actions? Are they actually that does their talk match their walk?
Exactly, right? And it's that sense of unevenness and of course the silent treatment, these feelings of betrayal that can start to happen within our family that really enables this incompleteness to remain a fixture in our minds. And a lot of times we see this with people in our Facebook community that go through these types of situations, and people that you consult and that I consult, of course. This is something of a regular occurrence for them. So let's talk about what we can do, Fern. I think this is important now. This is, of course, the more pragmatic and practical aspect of our episode today. I think that finding peace is important after experiencing incompleteness, shunning, or the silent treatment. And one of the things that we can do is to learn to mentally disown the outcome of what is happening, right? And we've talked about some of these situations, some of the reasons earlier today about why it is that that happens. And those can serve really as good reminders of why things are the way they are.
think it's important too to tweeze out what's fantasy and what's reality. Because if you constantly fall into the fantasy of what you hope the relationship will be, you will find that you will be falling on your face pretty frequently. As somebody who has been both estranged and reconciled from my brother, I can tell you pretty confidently that I'm still dealing with the same person. And I have to be very realistic about who he is and how that's going to affect our relationship and how who I am. I mean, I'm the same person as well. So I'm not just hanging it on him. But that combination has some of the same risks, whether
Absolutely.
we're estranged or reconciled.
Absolutely. And it's always walking on thin ice, right? It's
Mhm.
never completely solid or predictable in a positive way as much as we'd like it to be, right? There's always
Right.
something, right, that or work to be done and factors to be considered. And another factor to be considered, of course, is working on our own emotional detachment from the outcome, which is also helpful, right? Training ourselves mentally and emotionally to avoid feeling an adverse feeling is a way to progressively distance ourselves from a different or difficult outcome. And this is something I sometimes do in therapy with people to train them, to help them to get to that point where they can emotionally detach from a particular situation in a conscious and helpful way.
Yeah, and to be realistic about what you can get from these people, because one of the things I see with some of my clients is they keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome, and it doesn't change.
Exactly, right? And I think that if we berate ourselves, if we let our negative emotions get the best of us, this is where it becomes destructive towards us and detrimental, right? So we really, as we teach ourselves to detach from some of the negative emotions, not necessarily avoiding feeling them, but just detaching from the negative outcome that happens to us, and of course cultivate an attitude of self-compassion in that particular key moment, that will help us to regain a sense of value. And I often say to people, of course, it's good to use positive slogans to help themselves here in those particular key moments where self compassion is needed.
Yeah, there's a desperation sometimes in estrangement, and it does not serve you well. And in fact, when you work through your own issues and your manage your expectations of the relationship, you come to a different place, one I'd say of peace. And actually, there's this wonderful line that I've read several times, and the line is that the opposite of estrangement is not reconciliation. The opposite of estrangement is peace. And when you achieve that peace, you are whole.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we find that peace, there's a sense of meaning that we start to ascribe to our experience, right? And what does it mean now that we probably won't be having the end to our story? Where do we want to put the focus on our lives? How should we live our lives now that this has happened to us? And I really help my clients when it comes to the idea of attempting to answer this question, because this helps us to really put energy and attention in a more proactive place. Once you start to ask yourself, well, what do I do with this now that this has happened? So whatever answer you come up with, might be very different than somebody else's, but that answer will serve you to help you to move forward in your estrangement situation.
Yeah, you quit looking to a sibling for some things that you actually can give yourself.
Exactly. Very much so. So, Fern, we're almost out of time. So, let's talk about resources, you and I. So, what would be your number one resource at this time?
Well, I have been doing coaching and I've been helping individuals as they navigate some of these difficult sibling relationships and estrangements, making peace with estrangement. And I think that it is helpful and validating for the client, but it's also very instructive for me. I learn a lot from each client. So it's been a really enjoyable aspect of having written the book, Brothers, Sisters, Strangers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a great book, by the way. I really enjoyed reading it myself. And what my number one resource at this time would be the Sibling Estrangement Support Group that's on Zoom. I offer this twice monthly, and people can contact me through my website with the resources on screen right now. So take a look at that and see, and you can get in touch with me, and we can look to see if we can have you participate in one of our groups. Especially, and I'm also working on a resource for rumination as well. So it might already be out by the time you're watching this video. If not, I would suggest just stay tuned on my website to take a look and see when that is, and perhaps you can, of course, have a chance to participate in that, dear viewers. So, all right, Fern, we're just about out of time, so I really just wanted to thank you again for participating again and doing this. I think it's important to offer a voice for the number of people experiencing sibling estrangement, especially.
Yeah, it's its own Me Too movement.
Absolutely. So thanks for being a part of this. Thank you again for doing this, and I very much look forward to our next video very soon.
Me too.
Thanks. Take care.
I
Bye bye.